I have to confess that Proverb 17 was a bit of a disappointment to me. I was so hopeful that Michy, one of the world's top players, was going to offer some profound wisdom on a topic I found really difficult. But I suppose it's a slightly more simpler proverb than I'd expected. So the proverb is make sure you can play a six, and Michy gives this example where at the top, if you look at the top there, our opponent has started with a 3-1, the best possible roll, but we've rolled double sixes, and that's a lovely roll. So we bring two forward from the back, we bring two down from the middle, and suddenly we are big favourites to win the game. We're not quite at a double yet, but we're very strong favourites. But if you took that position where our opponent rolled a 3-1, and instead of them rolling a 3-1, you say they rolled a 6-1, and they'd have played it like this. Now, if we roll double sixes, they're an absolute pain. So we'll presumably bring two down from the midpoint. What do you do next? Well, I mean, you could bring two more down is one possibility, or you could put them back and bring two in from the 8 point. But either way, it's not satisfactory, and you're not black is now the favourite. So Mitch just kind of makes the point that sixes are an interesting roll, and sixes he says they can be like a joker roll, which is really good for us, or an absolute poison is the image he uses. And this is where I was so hopeful because I mean I'm only playing backgammon 5 years or so. I started in COVID, and what I found is the concept that I found hardest to understand and least well explained around the backgammoning world is the how to play a difficult six. So I thought this proverb was going to be what I call them awkward sixes. They're very often you see them it talks about as sixes from the bar, and I'll explain that. So I thought this was going to solve all my worries about this, but it isn't. It's a much simpler a proverb, and it really is just saying, make sure that you can play a six, and particularly with your two back checkers. If you look at our two back checkers up there in the picture, a six can't be played there. Now that's not our fault, but if you can, try and advance one of them. The phrase I've always used for myself is so they can see daylight. So they can sixes are great numbers to escape with if you can get past black's whatever blockade black is building for you. So this is the one position Michy gives a 5 and a 2. How do you play it? Well, I think naturally the only way to play the 5 is to come down to the midpoint. And apologies for all the coughing. But how do you play the 2? And you might say, well, look, let's bring another down to the midpoint. It's a good builder. It's starting to make progress. But now look what happens if we play a 6 in the next go. We have no good sixes. We're going to leave shots everywhere in the next go if we play sixes. Anywhere we play a 6, it's going to leave a shot. So instead of coming down with the 2, we split at the back with the 2. And this means if you look at our back checker there on black's 3 point that we've just split with, were we to roll a 6, which is such a great escaping number, next go, that's the right move. Were we to roll a 6, we can bypass the blockade. And I think this all ties in with, there's a coherence to all of the opening theory in backgammon. We've done a lot of videos where we looked at, split against a prime. Gary Koscielny phrases it, split if you're well blocked. So we're starting to get blocked there at the top. So we split against that. And that message of split against the prime sees us out of this trouble. And this, make sure you can play a 6, I think is covered by splitting against the prime all the time. And all these positions will show that. As I said, I'm sorry for all the coughing, but I'm just in a bit of a cold in me. Now here's a situation where we have 3 and a 1. And I have to admit, when you see this 3 and a 1, you think, great, we can make our own prime here. So we can play 10-7 and 8-7, end with the 10 and down with the 8. And we've made we've a better prime than black. Surely that's good. But look at the top right there, our two rearmost checkers. We roll 6s now. They're no good to us to help us escape because black has a checker on their 8 point, which blocks our checkers on the 2 point. They're 6 away, we're blocked. So that's not the right move. There's actually a really interesting thing here we can do. Instead of making the 4 prime, if we come down from the midpoint with the 3 and make our 10 point, look at it from black's point of view now. So they have made an anchor on our 4 point. And they're looking for 6s to escape that anchor. And what have we done? We've just blocked their 6s. So making our 10 point is really good. Blocking their anchor with a point of our own is really effective. So if you can if you're behind in the race and can make a point 6 away from your opponent's anchor, it's really good. And then with the 1, Just options. XG says one of the good options is playing 8 to 7. I'm not quite sure why. I presume because if you roll 6 next go, you do get a kind of a broken 6 prime there. You could play safely 6 to 5, might be safer, but none of them are the right. The only right move here is to split at the back, because from our point of view, again, our anchor is, we had an anchor on the 23 point, it's blocked. By splitting at the back, splitting into the prime, which is what we've been talking about all the time, you've got daylight, and if you were to roll a 6, you'd escape. So that's why that's the right decision, and anything else is quite a significant mistake. And the making the 4 prime with the 10 7 8 7, look there, it's fourth choice there is a blunder. It's in the red. So Gary Koscielny in sunny Florida Backgammon gives this position as well, the 4-1 situation. We've rolled a 4 and a 1. Now beginners tend to come down with the 4 and make their 13 to 8 move. We know at this stage that's very inflexible. You're going to have problems later on. You haven't really created anything. You've brought another checker into the ammunition into the zone, but really achieved very little else. So in put that back there, and instead, this is the mistake a lot of people make. They go from their 24 point and they make their 23 point, but they've made the very point that black is blocking. So we've just made it up the top right there and moved quite quickly in that. We went from 24 to 23 and made our 23 points nice and safe. It's safe, but it's blocked now. A roll of a 6 does nothing for it. So let's put it back there, and instead, you could move that forward, just one more. I think I possibly would have done that, but the XG prefers you to move that 23 to 22 and then move the back checker forward. So both checkers are now kind of seeing daylight. It just leaves, you'll find in backgammon, it's not good to leave blots on both sides of the board. And so that's why that's the correct move. It's not a huge error. Look, it's only a 22 millipoint error to play the move I was suggesting, which is this. But if you look at this, we have a blot at the bottom. We have 2 blots at the top. So we're leaving blots sooner around the place. The correct move is just a little bit tidier. And that's why it's only fractionally better, but it is better. And that's what it is. So there's a great series on YouTube called Backgammon. It's beautiful, really helpful. And Dan Rovira goes through this position. And again, Dan Rovira comes up with a verb that I really like here. So you've got a 5 and a 2, and he said, well, look, remember the last position, we'll come down with the 5, and we'll go from 24 to 22 and make a nice safe point there. And Dan Rovira uses this verb. He says, what you've done there is you've primed yourself. And I love this idea of priming yourself. You've actually you've put your checkers, you've made the very point that is blocked. And black has a prime, but you kind of lent into this prime and made their prime effective, because now when we roll 6s, we will have awkward 6s next time, and certainly 6s do nothing to help us escape. So I like that idea of Dan Rovira. You've primed yourself. So here, what could you do? Well, the best move is just come down 13 to 8 and then come down another point and make that Michy one, make the outfield point. I would have got that wrong. The two options, the second best move I would have considered was just run, get past the blockade and just kind of take a chance he's going to get there. The other thing I might have done is brought from, they say that when your opponent has a prime, come up to the face of the prime, and I might have faced off against the prime there and just played 11 to 6 just to tidy things up down the bottom. The problem with that is black has 10 checkers in the zone, lots of chances of making their 5 point and putting you in the bar. So for that reason, it's probably just a little bit too risky. And I was wrong there. My move there is third choice is a blunder. But certainly, any move where you make the 22 point, playing 24 to 22, look, they're fourth and fifth choices, or you're well into the red blunder zone at that stage. Finally, an interesting point, an interesting one from Dan Rovira as well. He just used this as an example. Now we know we want to. It's good sometimes to block our opponent's anchor. So our opponent is an anchor on the 4 point. We've rolled a 2 and a 1, and you might think, come down from the 13 to 11 and make the 10, and you've blocked your opponent in. But the problem is, would you just look at the numbers on the right-hand side? Who's ahead in the race? We are. So if we're ahead in the race, we don't want to make it. We now will have trouble getting that point we've just made, our 10 point, past black's anchor, because again, 6s will play really badly for us. So it's a really interesting distinction Dan Rovira makes. Is when you're behind, we would make that point as quick as we could and block black in. But when we're ahead, We don't want to be making that point. It's just trouble. Instead, we just tidy things up there so black can't hit us. And look up the top. Black has a prime. Uh, there's very little options for daylight there. But if we play the 1 from 24 to 23, now if we roll a 6, look, there's actually daylight 6 away from that checker we've just moved forward. And so 6 is, as I said, such a powerful number, we'll be in a position to capitalize on them. And that's the right move. Now, Dan Rovira does a number of videos that I've kind of incorporated into these notes. One is he did things, 6 ideas about sixes, and he did some other pointless points. Was another series, another video he did. I've kind of put things together a little bit here, and he had 6 things about sixes, and I've just focused on 3 of them for now, which I think are kind of probably the most important ones. Don't make points which leave you stripped in the outfield. So don't. There's a concept in backgammon that Dan Rovira talks about having too many points. TMP means too many points. Too many points that are only got 2 checkers on them are really, you're going to have to break points to move it. They're really inflexible. Don't make points with you stripped, and don't make too many points. The second thing there is, don't make more points when you're ahead in the race. Just race. If you're ahead in the race, don't be worrying about kind of making blocking points. Just race. And then that third concept, and that verb that I said that like priming yourself, he said, don't make points which prime yourself further. Don't play into your opponent's hands. Finally, just 2 other concepts. That's the basics. But as I'm kind of making these notes for myself and kind of, I'm trying to challenge myself to learn more, there are 2 other concepts that are more, I suppose, higher level skill, but just worth bearing in mind. We have this position here. How do you play this position with a 4 and a 2? And one of Dan Rovira's points is, or one of his theories is, don't make points 6 spaces away from your opponent's anchor when you're ahead. Now, we've already looked at that in a previous position, but look at this here. I think the natural temptation, you play a 4 and a 2, and you look at the 2 white checkers up in the top left and think, that's super. You can play down with the 4 and cover it with the 2, and you're nice and safe. The problem is, you're 6 away from the anchor. We're way ahead. All we're trying to do is come in safely. And by making that point that's 6 away from the anchor, when we roll 6s now, we're going to give ourselves a really messy position. There's lots of kind of 6-1 will roll badly, 6-2 will roll terribly badly, 6-3 you'll get away with for a round, but just you've got a big gap then. 6-4 will roll badly, 6-5 will roll badly. Well, you get away with it for one roll, and the next time it comes around to you, you've got huge gaps. So making that point, our 11 point, which is 6 away from black's anchor, is making the very point we're trying to avoid. So instead, he says, let's go back in that. And the correct move is just to bring a checker safely around as fast as you can. We could get hit. Black could roll double 6s, or they could roll an 8. So that's 6 chances out of 36. They could hit us. But if they don't, we're safe. And if we play making the 11-point move, we're going to have much more problems later on. So that's just too risky a position to kind of leave. And if you look at it, it's a 139 millipoint, number 3 there, 139 millipoint blunder to do that. We're better off just bringing a checker in, or bringing a checker down. The other concept that Dan Rovira introduces that I think is quite interesting, it's take this position and how would you play a 4 and a 1, and he just gives this advice that when we're attacking and we've made a gap we have a prime, but we have a gap in our prime, we should try to make a point 6 away from the gap, so that our opponent is going to really struggle. They might make it into the gap, but then they're really going to be struggling getting out of the gap. And that's, I suppose, the concept here. So if you look down the bottom here, we've got a nice little prime starting to build down the bottom of those little line of white checkers, but we haven't made our 4 point. So if black rolls certain numbers, they'll be able to move into our 4 point and then springboard from there into the outfield. So that 4 point is a gap there. We can't make it this time, but we can start to kind of, block them in a bit, or kind of prepare for that. So the best way to play the 4 and the 1 is to come down with the 4 from 14 to 10, and then play 11 to 10. And now look, what we've done here is we've made a point 6 away from the gap in our prime. And I said, this is very high level stuff. If you want to just kind of go with this idea of don't prime yourself, that's the nub of what Michy was saying. But Dan Rovira moves this on and just says, in this situation here, were black to roll, we'd say a 2 in the next go. So that's what you can see. Anything else is a big blunder. But were black to roll a 2 in the next go, Doesn't mean they have to roll a 2-6, but they could roll a 2-4 or 2-5 or something. It's not saying that we're blocking them from getting out, but they cannot escape our crosshairs. So we are targeting them in the next go. And um, having the making our point 6 away from our prime is incredibly powerful. And I suppose that's Dan Rovira's big point here. So that's it for what Michy had to say. This idea of, I really suppose what he's saying with make sure you can play a 6 is just at the back, as I keep crediting Dan Rovira with this phrase, don't prime yourself at the back. Split into a prime, we know about that, and do everything you can so that if you roll a 6 next go, you'll have daylight. The word I keep thinking of is you have daylight at the back to be able to move it on. So that's it for this Michy proverb. I'm going to do a follow-up part B proverb where I look at these awkward 6s, because I think 6s are the most tricky number to roll in backgammon. As I said, Bill Roberti, Dirk Sheeman talk about the 6s from the bar and how to play them. So when I kind of have a look at those notes, I'm basically going to go online, just get everything I can about 6s from the bar and awkward 6s. I don't know. The more I've looked at this, there doesn't seem to be any hard and fast rules. But that's what I'm going to. The next video will look at that as much as I can about how you would play 6s from the bar.